I am not a great bass player. I'm not talking about being one of the greats. I'm not talking about being a Anthony Jackson or a Pino Palladino. I'm just talking about being great in its own right. This isn't false modesty. I know that one of my friends in particular is going to say to me, "Oh, you're great," but this concept is really important. Knowing that I'm not great, knowing that I'm merely good, is the reason I could be great, and the reason that you could be great as well. So, what am I talking about? So, I think that there's this awareness, being aware of where you are, and being aware of your shortcomings. That's that's the thing that can help you propel yourself to the next level. Bass playing, everything else in music, all comes down to practice, all comes down to practicing the right things and the intention to improve. So I know quite, quite well where I stand in the bass world. I know the things that I'm good at. I know the things that I've prioritized and worked on and work on constantly. And I know the things that I haven't worked on and have, purposefully focused in certain areas and not others. Um, Knowing what those areas to work on are, that's the secret. And I've seen this written a few times where people are saying, fill out this questionnaire or go into this deep dive in terms of your playing. I think that overcomplicates it. I think we just need to look at what makes a good musician, a good bass player in particular, and what then can move you from good to great. So, what is it that a good bass player needs to have? I think that it comes down to a couple of things: time, feel, being able to play in time and with good feel, which is different for every genre. Um, Being aware of what good sounds like, being aware of when you are playing well and not playing well, and being able to correct that. And I think that a lot of that comes down to having good taste, which is also something that can be worked on. And I think having a basic vocabulary and a basic repertoire for the genres that you're interested in is what makes you a good bass player. I'd recommend starting with a single genre, the thing that you listen to the most. For me, I ended up getting really into blues music, largely because of um, going to jam sessions, meeting a lot of blues players, being invited to join blues bands, sit in and depth for gigs and stuff. So like I ended up listening to a lot of blues, really getting into it, and kind of prioritizing that as the thing that I did, and became, that was the thing I was known for: laid back, bluesy, um, simple bass lines with a good feel, and I worked hard on just being that. So like if you're jamming with people or you're in a band, I think pretty much what genre you're dealing with, and what the things are for that genre that good players have. If you aren't in a band, you're just starting out, you're not jamming with others, you're just in your bedroom learning. Start with the music that you listen to. That's the music that you already have the vocabulary within you. You've heard it. You can hum the songs, hum the melodies. If you listen to heavy metal, you know the Metallica songs, you know the Iron Maiden songs, showing my age a bit. If you're into Motown, you hear what these bass lines sound like. If you listen, you've heard Jameson play, you've heard the bass line to Bernadette, you can hum it. It's so that inbuilt vocabulary is important. You're not having to learn that from scratch. And then the timing of certain genres, you feel it just through having internalized it and listened to it a lot. If you play the blues, that kind of neo soul, anything kind of that kind of style, you'll be looking at playing slightly behind the beat, in the pocket, that kind of thing. If you are listening to a lot of, I don't know, bluegrass, you definitely don't want to be behind the beat. As a gig that I depped on a couple of years ago, I was told, bass players that play behind the beat on bluegrass records don't get to play on the next one. So, these are things that you might not even be aware of, but when you play, you know to listen for, and you know whether that's the thing that you're doing right, and you're building your taste, your good taste, your appreciation for quality, which is a subject that I'm fascinated by. So using your vocabulary, using your inbuilt feelings about music, you can apply good taste. People are always talking about listening to the band and using your ears, and I think that leads people down a path that's slightly confusing and doesn't necessarily give you what you need in order to become a good musician. I think that your ears are switched on, the sound is coming in, but it's what you do with that sound afterwards. So by listening to the band, you need to do something with that information. So if you're in a situation and the band leader is starting to play louder and the dynamics are starting to build and the drummer responds to that, or the drummer doesn't respond to that but you do, you start to play a little bit louder and the drummer follows you, and then suddenly the whole thing is coming to a crescendo. That's coming from you using your ears and you responding to what's appropriate. When I've played in orchestras, we have a conductor, and the conductor is telling you the dynamics. The conductor is doing this stuff for you, and you're basically reading stuff off the sheet and following, the gestures, and that's building the music and the feeling of the music. But in the absence of a conductor, and just in general, someone in the band is the band leader generally, especially with blues and jazz. So just following them and using that to do the right thing is important. I think with taste also, when I talked about the things to be good, the basic repertoire, basic vocabulary, I would much rather hear someone playing root notes, just root notes, in the pocket for the entire song, not changing anything, and serving the song, getting people dancing. If you listen to some old funk records, especially like James Brown stuff, he almost treated the musicians like samplers, and they did not change for the whole song. They played their line, they didn't deviate, they were in the pocket, and that's it. That level of repertoire, that level of vocabulary is quite small. If you can play the song and you can play it over and over again for 10 minutes, you've done the job. Having the decency to not add in some crazy fills. You might do it now and again, but I've heard guys that just do fills all over the place. Their dynamics change when they do them. They don't come back in on the one. You hear it with drummers all the time, right? They play this heavy fill, it's really flamboyant. Their limbs are going everywhere, and then they miss coming back in, and it's just like a car crash. So good taste, picking the right amount of notes, doing the right thing that's appropriate, and not overextending yourself. Just doing what can I do and stay in time and keep everyone dancing. So what does it take to become great? If you're already good, then I guess the first thing is knowing you're not great. And if you think you're great, why are you watching my videos? Go and carry on being great. But I think that being great is just doing much more of what it takes to be good. And so if you look at Pino Palladino as an example, like his feel is fantastic. You hear him on John Mayer Trio. He's just like doing some really solid playing, perfectly in time, has that perfect feel. You know, it's almost like you wouldn't notice him if you weren't a musician, you weren't a bass player, you're just someone who casually listens to music. You wouldn't even notice he was there. He's just doing his thing. And then you look at some of the note choices that he's got and some of the fills that he puts in and the technique that he's got, the ability to move up and down the neck. Some of the John Mayer recordings of them live, it's just like mind blowing. Sheree Reed, another example of just, when he's playing in church, ultimate pocket, just like super serving the song, and then all of a sudden he's like playing some lick, and all the other guys that are sitting there waiting to play, I feel sorry for them having to follow that, but they're just like blown away by it. But everyone else in the church, they're just grooving and just feeling that. But that sort of stuff, being able to pull that off, put it off so that it remains musical, put it off so that no one notices, you don't make a mistake. That's great. That's what a true great does. I think that being able to do these things across multiple genres is another thing that really calls out a great player. If you look at the catalogue of Anthony Jackson, his stuff with the OJs, his stuff with Chaka Khan, and then you've got things that he did with Michael Camillo. Just he's taken this funk and this like a modern funk and then jazz, and like I think Anthony's one of the few people that probably knows he's great, and he's probably great because he has remained unwavering to being better than everyone else. There's a famous interview with him where they were talking about samplers and MIDI and that sort of thing. It's a very old interview, and he was like, "I won't be outplayed by a machine. I just won't allow that to happen." And so his work ethic, his ability to understand what differentiated him from a machine, that's one of the reasons that he's great. The ability to master one genre and maybe move on to the next, or just equally be into so many different types of music that you can cover that easily. And I think that repertoire and vocabulary, you've got to really listen to the music a lot. You can't just go, oh yeah, I know how to, I don't know, play this particular shape over this particular chord type, but I don't think that that's it. I don't think really that I don't really think that theory is the answer. I think that a lot of people know a lot of theory but aren't great bass players, and I think that the musical side of it is something else. It comes from your ears and listening and really understanding it. The other thing that great bass players do is all of that stuff, and they can do it much faster. Like being able to improvise, being able to just put on a chord progression and instantly play over it. There's a bit of a trend going on at the moment in the bass world, but it's been happening across other instruments for quite a while, and I'm really into the videos. I'll link a couple down below, but it's the professional bass player hears X for the first time, and they take out the bass part, and the person has to come up with what they would play on that particular song, and then they compare it to what was on the record. And I think that for people doing sessions and the people that have played on the records that you love, and people that have got the gigs with the other great musicians that you love. That ability to just, do these things and do them appropriately is great. The one I saw recently was Yannick Guesdala playing Thundercat, and Yannick's one of these guys that has got a lot of theory, but he kind of, I'm not sure that he's approaching it from the theory side. I think that he's like, oh yeah, I hear this, and then he'll play that, and then he'll tell you what he played afterwards. It's like, oh yeah, it's just a minor pentatonic or Mixolydian scale or whatever. But I think that the stuff comes from inside, and it comes from being internalized over many reps, and just a ton of practice, which all of this comes down to. Whatever level you are, practicing, working on your weaknesses, working on your strengths as well. If you're a great blues player and you want to be, remain a great blues player or become even better, then you just practice that. So what I'd say, not being a great player myself, I'm certainly not a teacher. If you're not at the good level, just work on prioritizing feel and time over notes. Don't worry about learning notes. Record yourself playing, listen to it back. Do you stand out like a sore thumb? If so, you've done a bad job, in my opinion. Do you blend into the band well? Do you, keep in time? Has the music got a feel into it that's coming from you, coming from the rhythm section? Are you working well with the drummer? That sort of thing. Just really worry about that stuff. You don't need a ton of notes. In fact, I'd almost argue that if you're trying to work on learning a bunch of theory at that stage, you're doing it wrong. I would definitely it's just my opinion, but I would definitely not be learning theory up front. I would just be like, if you know a root note and a fifth and an octave, maybe a third, you've got everything you need, or maybe a seventh, depending on what you're up to. But that's it. You don't need anything else. So time, feel, good taste, listen, and you're on your way to being a great bass player.